Hi guys, welcome to my podcast, Hot Mess Hate, where we do real talk about real things from the silly to the serious. Today, let's talk about adulting. When I was a kid, I used to think that being an adult would be the most amazing thing ever. Who didn't, right? Adults got to go where they wanted, when they wanted, do what they wanted, whenever they wanted. Adulting seemed totally awesome. I think I was about 10 when the reality of, or at least I got an inkling of the reality of adulting. My parents divorced, and I think that was probably my first lesson in adulting not being a walk in the park. After that, my mom and I moved to a new town and into a new house. She'd always wanted to buy a house, so she worked her ass off and bought a house. And that's where we lived until I was 18 and left for the military. She sacrificed a lot to be able to have that house. And I watched her and I learned that adulting is hard. But I hadn't yet figured out how hard it was. Not yet. When I was in high school, I got a job and I knew my mother struggled financially, so I started paying a lot of my own way, or as much of my own way as I could. I bought my own school lunches. I bought my own clothes. I bought myself a crappy little car, which my mother calls Heap 1, which I totaled after falling asleep behind the wheel one night after work. So that's a story. And I tell this story to my kids all the time. Well, not all the time, but I definitely told this story to my kids when I was teaching them to drive. When I was in high school, I obviously did the school thing. Somehow I managed to graduate with honors. I have literally no idea how that happened. But I was in band, so I was pretty busy with that. I did the marching band thing. And I also worked. And I worked a lot, or it seems like I worked a lot. I felt like I worked a lot. So I was coming home from work one night and I was exhausted because I'd been working a lot and just had no downtime. I worked about 30 minutes away from where I lived, so it was a 30-minute drive late at night. We had closed whatever store I happened to be working at the time. And I was on my way home and I had been driving for a little while and I looked down and I didn't have a seatbelt on. So I pulled over and I put my seatbelt on, and less than a mile later, I fell asleep behind the wheel. And I woke up to the rumble bumps on the right side of the road, and it startled me, and that's what woke me up. And I jerked the wheel to the other direction and ended up going off the road and into the ditch on the other side of the road. I flipped my car. The next thing I remember after jerking the wheel was standing in the middle of the road at 10:30 at night, flagging down a passing vehicle. There were two men in this vehicle. Thank God they weren't axe murderers. But they took me to my sister's work, she worked at a truck stop and was on duty at the time. But I remember looking over at my vehicle and it was upside down in a ditch. If I hadn't put my seatbelt on, I would not be talking to you right now. I would be dead. I would have broken my neck or have been ejected from the car or something. So wear your seatbelts. Anything can happen. I definitely caused that accident, but if I hadn't realized I didn't have my seatbelt on and pulled over to fix it, I would be dead. Anyway, so adulting. Speaking of adulting, my mother came and picked me up from that little fiasco and took me straight to the ER, and I got to skip school the next day, so hey, yay, that's like the only time I skipped, although I guess it wasn't really skipping. Anyway, shout out to my mom. She really struggled to make ends meet and set money aside and gave me money for a replacement somehow. God bless my mom. Anyway, with all of that responsibility, the job, and trying to be responsible, I really thought I was making strides toward adulting. But I still had no idea how hard adulting could be. Not yet. So after I graduated from high school, I joined the military. Some people think the military is hard. It certainly can be, but it's definitely not adulting, at least not at first. When you first join the military, they do pay you, so you have a salary, but you have your housing provided for you. They cook meals for you. Someone else cleans up from those meals. they definitely give you a room and you have to clean up your own room, but they're literally telling you where to live, when to eat, what to eat, how to wear your clothes. I mean, the military is, it's like you're still living at home. I kind of call it adulting light. You go into the military, you think you're adulting, and yet you're not. You're definitely not. At least not when you first go in. We got to pretend we were adulting, but really, we were all still being parented by Uncle Sam. While I was in the military, though, I met my husband and we got married and we had our first son. That was really when I maybe think I started to get an inkling that adulting could really be rough. Having a newborn and trying to figure out the logistics of childcare and caring for them yourselves, like, good Lord, that's really tough at first. Super rewarding, but it's hard. It's hard to make that switch to being a parent, especially when previously you were in the military and you thought you were adulting, but really Uncle Sam was still parenting you. Parenting in a way that ensures your kids are safe and going to grow up to be productive members of society is kind of a crapshoot. You never know if what you're doing is the right thing. I feel like a lot of adulthood is like that. You really have absolutely no idea if what you're doing is the right thing. You just hope so. Adulting is hoping that you're not screwing up too bad. Maybe. I don't know. So I definitely had no idea what I was doing as a new parent, and I am 21 years in. I'm still not sure that I'm doing it right. It is my fondest parenting desire that my kids don't end up on a therapist couch, thanks to me. Keep me in your prayers, please. Anyway, fast forward a decade or so after having my kids, and my boys got involved with the Boy Scouts, which is really fantastic. My husband loves outdoorsy stuff too, so he also got involved. The Boy Scout troop that my boys were involved with is a really excellent and active troop. They have lots of overnight campouts in some really, really cool places. The boys found a love of camping and hanging out with their friends, and they did that a lot on the weekends, and my husband often went with them. I got to go sometimes too, but generally it was my husband. Someone had to stay home and keep the critters fed and cared for, so usually that was me. And in being the one that was most often left alone with no one but the critters to care for, that is when I learned how hard adulting really is. And I learned some things about myself in the process. Adults are responsible, right? Not this one. Totally not this one. Leave me unattended with no one to care for, and I turn into a teenage boy. Like, maybe the house would get cleaned while my men were off doing Boy Scout things, but definitely don't expect me to feed myself anything resembling a square meal. I learned that unless I have to cook for someone else and take care of someone else, I am likely to have popcorn or a can of green beans or a donut for dinner. For me, adulting is really, really difficult if there's no one to care for. And I think that a lot of us are really faking adulthood. Like, we are doing the fake it until we make it and muddling through in the best way we can and just hoping we get it right. Or at least I am.